So you want to be a lawyer. What's it truly like? Some of you are thinking about becoming a lawyer. Our guest today is going to tell us what it's really like not only to be a lawyer, but to be a celebrity divorce attorney.
Welcome to Admissions Straight Talk, the podcast dedicated to graduate admissions and helping you approach the application process thoughtfully and successfully. Your host is Accepted's founder and world-renowned admissions guru, Linda Abraham. At Accepted, our mission is to get you to that unforgettable moment when you read your acceptance email and shout, "Yes, I'm in!" Confident you'll be attending the perfect program to help you launch the career of your dreams.
Welcome to the 401st episode of Admissions Straight Talk, Accepted's podcast. Thanks for tuning in. The featured resource for today's show is the Law School Admissions Guide, 8 Tips for Success, and that's a free download. You can snag your copy at accepted.com/401 download. It gives me great pleasure to have as a guest on Admissions Straight Talk, Christopher Melcher, divorce attorney to the stars. Some of you may wonder, what does celebrity family law, which almost seems like an oxymoron, have to do with admissions? And that's a very good question. I thought those listeners considering a JD may want to learn what lawyers really do, what the career is really like. Now, Chris got his JD in 1993 at Pepperdine Law, went initially into criminal law and personal injury litigation, and has been with the family law firm of Walter Melcher since 2002. He's also an adjunct professor at Pepperdine Law. Chris, welcome to Admissions Straight Talk.
Thanks for having me, Linda. I'm excited to be here and talk about admissions and what it's like to be a lawyer. And I'm really hoping that this conversation is going to be helpful to our audience.
I hope so too. I'm sure it will be, actually. Okay, so let's go back in time a little bit. How did you decide that a career in the law is for you?
Well, that was easy for me because my dad was a lawyer. And so he was a deputy district attorney in the early 1970s. And when I was really young, he would come home and talk to me about his cases. And these were, serious cases. And I might have been 6, 7 years old when he started talking to me about his cases. And he would explain what he was working on. And then he would ask me, "What do you think?" And that got my legal mind started because he was genuinely interested in my opinion. And I don't know, what I had to share at that age, but we would have these conversations. And as I got older, I'm sure got better. But I remember that and him really wanting to know what I thought. And I had the feeling like he would maybe use some of that input for his cases and arguments and trials that he was in. And so that helped form this legal analytical mind. And then as I got older and I kind of got in some trouble in grade school, and I remember being in the principal's office and my buddy Don was there too, and for some unrelated offense. And he would ask me like, "Oh, I got in trouble. What should I do?" And I would give him advice. And so I was like a little jailhouse kind of lawyer there as a kid, helping my buddies craft their stories for the principal. And so that's how it started, and kind of getting those legal juices kind of going in my brain.
That's a pretty interesting way to get it going. Did you test the thesis as you got older?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a lawyer from that early age, but I really didn't want to do the work. And so I kind of wanted to grow up too fast. And that really was a mistake. I mean, I had a lot of fun, but I didn't want to put the work in. And so that held me back. And I think back then it was easier to slack in school and still survive. And so I don't know what I would do now. And I feel the pressure on students now is so much greater than it was, and I'm talking about in the 80s for me, because I could kind of get by as a C student without studying or reading or doing anything, and somehow got into college and somehow got into law school. And so I kind of had it easy, but because I think of the time. But so things really clicked for me probably in the second or third year of college when I decided, okay, I got to actually do this and take it seriously. And then I kind of kicked it into high gear and finished off college, got into law school.
Okay. And you initially started out in I guess your dad's field, which was criminal law, and then switched to family law. Um, Other than the joke, what do outlaws and criminals have in common? That I mean, uh, how the switch? Why the switch?
Well, and this is, I'm hoping will be helpful for folks to see, because when I was in law school, I had my whole future mapped out. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a corporate securities lawyer, and because I had met somebody doing that, and they made a ton of money, and I was like, wow, this is for me. And I liked corporate law. I liked all this with the investing angle, and some of these lawyers were taking a piece of the action basically for these companies that they were helping to form, and getting paid quite a bit of money when if the company was successful. So that was my goal. And so I figured I was going to go out of law school, work at the Securities and Exchange Commission, learn the field, and then switch over to private sector and get rich. And I had it all planned. And then when I got out in 93, 94, economy was in the tank
Yeah.
and no one was hiring. Not even the district attorney's office was hiring, which was my fallback position. And so I had to I went into private practice and really not knowing what I was doing and just taking any case that I could get. And criminal was the easiest to go into because my dad had taught me some stuff on criminal and was able to help me get some experience there. And then it was just really by happenstance that I went into family law. And the point I think is, and I've taught to my law students about, is that, I mean, it's great to have a plan, but you got to be flexible and you got to look for opportunities because things don't turn out the way we expected them. And the law school career is a long play. I mean, it's thinking about it during college of applying and then going through law school, and what is the economy going to look like 4 years from now? Nobody knows that.
Right.
And so it's a long-term play. It's nice to have an idea and a vision, but you have to be flexible. And had I not kept my eyes open and been willing to talk to this divorce lawyer that I met, I would have never gotten into this field, and it would have been a huge mistake.
What's a typical day like for you now as a family law attorney?
Well, it's so I'm a litigator.
Okay.
So there's different kinds of lawyers, and generally we're people think of lawyers as going to court, but that's not always true. But that's what I do. I'm a litigator, so I go to court. And there's other types of lawyers who are what I call transactional lawyers, who will basically work on deals and form companies or negotiate contracts, work on applications, and they never go to court. And then there could be lawyers who use their law degree in other ways, like real estate development, investing, that kind of thing. But as a litigator, going deadline to deadline, and it's a rough life, because of the stress of having deadlines that you're constantly meeting. And so that's one thing. If somebody's interested in law, is talking to a practicing lawyer about the different types of lawyers out there, because some people want the action like I do. I want to be in court. I want to argue. I love that adrenaline rush, but it's not for everyone. And then to realize that in this field of litigation that you're deadline driven. And so it's I have a major deadline on Tuesday that I cannot move, and I'll be working. Here it is Friday as we're speaking. I'll be working the entire weekend on that. Um, and that's just the kind of way it is, unfortunately.
I guess I doubly appreciate the fact that you're taking the time to do this call, this interview.
Well, I mean, I'm passionate about this because I think law is a great field, and it's been so wonderful for me, and I want to share that with people and to see like, hey, is this right for you? And so because it is such a big investment of time and money to get a law degree and to go through all that process and be unhappy with it, and maybe it's because they didn't get the right advice. And what I've seen again in teaching my law class at Pepperdine, there's students there that never met a practicing lawyer before. And so how do you really know what a lawyer does? And so my encouragement is go out and talk to one. And if you ask 10 lawyers for help, you're going to get at least a few who are going to say, yeah, I'll help you. And so that's the secret here. One of the things I wanted to talk about was to ask for help, talk to a lawyer, pick up the phone or send an email, connect on LinkedIn, and to say, hey, I'm thinking about going to law school or I'm applying. Could you give me some tips? There's people like myself who would be very happy to put time aside to say, absolutely, what do you want to talk about? How can I help? And to utilize, people don't do it, but they should.
I know we've had, I can remember, friends going into professions, and certainly we've had prospective clients call us and say, my aunt really wants me to become a lawyer, or my parents feel I should become a lawyer because I like to argue. Uh, and therefore I want to apply to law school. Or we at one point had a child who wanted to go to law school mainly because this child didn't want to leave school, which is another terrible reason to want to go to law school. And the best reason to become a lawyer is because to go to law school is because you want to become a lawyer, and you obviously have to know what that is. So your suggestion is very well taken. And looking back on the friends of mine who years ago went to law school because of usually parental or family pressure, they were not, most of them were not happy with it.
Well, that's what I saw in law school when I started, because especially back then, I kind of figured like, well, everyone thinks the same as I do, that fallacy and so when I started talking to my fellow students, I realized that there were a lot of folks there who went to law school because it was expected of them, or they didn't know what else to do, and they had no real passion or interest in being a lawyer. And I just couldn't understand that, because, like I say, this was been since I was in fifth grade. I decided I'm going to be a lawyer, and I figured like, everyone else must think the same, and no, they don't. And it's hard. I feel bad for those folks, because how are you going to invest all that time and going to law schools like a full-time job?
Yeah.
I mean, it was intense, and to put that much time into something and be in that much debt for something you're not sure you want to do, it's not going to work out. And that's where the students that I saw dropping out. And that's just a terrible thing. And so what I would absolutely do again is start picking up the phone, email. LinkedIn is really good.
Yeah.
Get on LinkedIn and connect with practicing lawyers. If the lawyer is on there, and you can check on LinkedIn for their posting activity. And so you're check somebody who has an active account that's posting regularly. That person is highly engaged using LinkedIn. If you message them, there's a very good chance they're going to respond. And then you can just say, hey, I'm thinking about applying to law school. Can I have a few minutes of your time? And I guarantee you, if you send 10 of those messages, you'll get 3, 4, 5 of those back that'll say yes. And do that homework, and then find an area where it's like, wow, okay, yeah, this did spark my passion. I talked to this lawyer, they're intellectual property lawyer, or they're a prosecutor or defense lawyer, whatever it happened to be. And maybe you say, wow, this is really for me, and I want to do this. And now you have a connection, now you have a reason, you have a passion to pursue. rather than just going into it and then getting your law degree, then start figuring out what does it mean to be a lawyer.
Right. Thank you. That's a great answer. Now, what is let's say most of our listeners are not yet in law school. Obviously, this is an admissions podcast. What, in your opinion, is good preparation for law school and legal practice if you're still in college, or maybe if you're out of college and just thinking of going back to law school for a law degree?
Yeah, I think that I mean, the good thing about a law degree is there's no real prerequisite for it. It's not like a medical degree where you're going to have to take certain classes in college. For a law degree, it doesn't matter, and that's the beauty of it. You know, a lot of people do political science and as a gateway undergraduate degree. I didn't do that. I did psychology, which I think is better, because most of what we do as lawyers is people skills. And like in my job, divorce, I mean, this is counseling people is the biggest part of my job and probably the most value that I bring. And then I've got a little bit of math and, you know, some law stuff that I got to do, but it's mostly people skills. So a psychology degree would be great preparation for an undergrad. Political science, obviously, also accounting, any of these things, finance, um, that's all great. And then I think this LSAT has nothing to do with being a lawyer. You know, you got to take this test. But if you're studying it or looking at it and saying, "Wow, I don't really like this," don't worry about it because there's absolutely nothing to do with being a lawyer.
They also have
And
the option to take the GRE. Not all schools, but increasing numbers of school are accepting the GRE.
uh, so, I mean, it's just something you got to do.
Yeah.
But it's so I wouldn't, if you're looking at those tests and saying, "Wow, I don't want to be a lawyer because look at these questions," that has nothing to do with being a lawyer. It's just a test. So I wouldn't don't be scared off by that.
I've also heard that taking classes that require a good deal of writing is good preparation for being a lawyer, whether it's English or history or literature of different kinds. Do you
Yeah.
agree or not so much?
Well, so this is true. In law, we have really a formula for writing, and which serves me well because if you ask me to write a poem, I could not do it for the life of me. I could not do it. But if you ask me to write a legal brief, well, that I can do that in my sleep. And the reason is because it's mechanical. And so we have a formula. It's called IROC, issue, rule, application, conclusion, and it's a formula. So it's like, what's the issue? Okay, what's the rule of law? How do you apply that rule to the facts, and what is your conclusion? And so that's a standard essay method, and then we use that in practice for brief writing. So to me, you know, it's easy as pie to write that. Some people though grapple with it, and I think it's just maybe it's how you're wired. But to me, I'm I find that very easy to do. I think if you have an English major, you're taking classes on literature, writing, that is definitely going to help because we're communicating mostly in writing. We don't have a lot of oral arguments, and I think that the biggest mistake that lawyers make is they speak like lawyers because nobody understands what they're saying and it sounds smart, but it's a terrible way to communicate. And so what I've kind of learned is not to speak like a lawyer. And the lawyers here that I train, I say, you know, do it in English. Like if you wouldn't say it, don't write it. And
Right.
so the we don't want to speak like a lawyer. If we can have language that is persuasive and clear, we're going to win our cases.
You're actually anticipating my next question, which is I assume you occasionally or have either legal interns or young lawyers in your firm. What, and obviously you're a professor at Pepperdine Law. What do legal students or young interns do right, and what do they do wrong?
Well, I think that it's hard to get into these law firms, especially the smaller law firms, as an intern,
Yeah.
because the smaller firms don't have training programs, they don't have the capacity, they're all busy, and so it's probably going to be more the mid-sized firms to target. I
Right.
think that the wrong way of targeting is to try and oversell yourself. So I do see people coming in like, oh, I interned last year, so all of a sudden now I've got, vast experience or something. And it's like, that's a huge turnoff, because we're going to train you. We're going to tell you what we hope you need to know. And if somebody's coming in saying that they know it all, they're not even going to get an interview. So I think that there's some humility there, and it's hard because how do you sell yourself? How do you stand out from the crowd, from all the other law students? So I would not be pushing on, oh, I'm so smart and experienced. I would be looking at, well, these are my hobbies. This is my life story. This is my interest. This is what makes me special. And it has nothing to do with your GPA or what school you went to, but it's like, what is interesting about you? And then we could say, wow, okay, I'd really like to get to know this person. This is somebody I would like to work with. So I would come in on that angle. I would be coming in through LinkedIn. And again, looking, if you're not on LinkedIn, you need to be on LinkedIn, and you need to start making connections with lawyers before you even go to law school. And that way that I talked before, these are connections that are going to serve you for the rest of your career. And so go on LinkedIn, look up the people's profiles that are lawyers in your area, and see that they're posting regularly, because some have a lot of just dormant accounts. But if they're posting regularly, you know that they're engaged. Comment on their stuff, make a connection with them, and then hit them up and say, hey, I'm thinking about starting law school. I have the summer break or whatever. Could I come in and do some work in your office? And they might say, sure. And that's a great way to make that connection, a great way to see what a lawyer does. So that's what I think would be done well.
Sounds good. Thank you. It's great advice. My husband's friend is an attorney and has a small legal and tax practice. And he once had an intern in his office, and the guy came in, and he was dressed, I think, in a t-shirt and jeans and sandals. And so the attorney told him to please come in a a button down shirt. He didn't have to wear a jacket or tie, but button down shirt, slacks, and shoes. And the intern said to him, "Man, you're stressing me out." And about a week later, he went back to my husband's friend and he said, "Can you give me some feedback?" So my husband's friend didn't have a lot of feedback to give him. He'd only been there a week, maybe it was 2 weeks, but it wasn't a long time into the summer. And he's like, "Well, okay, you could improve on this. You could improve on this. You've done this well." He gave him some feedback. And in the middle of the night, he got an email from this fellow that he's resigning. He couldn't take the feedback.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's also important for interns to realize that the standards in a professional office are a little bit different than perhaps on a college campus.
Yeah, and we've seen that, and we've seen it in different directions. So we have had the people come in with the flip flops and have to say, hey, look at how everyone else is dressed here, um, and this is part of it's important, because if you haven't worked in a professional office before, how would you know? And so this is the benefit of an internship, is to talk about office decorum, because you can learn all that you want to about law, but until you're actually in a law office, you wouldn't know these things.
Mm.
And how do you dress? And then also there's a hierarchy in the law firm, and so certainly the lawyers know that there's associates, and then mid-level partners and senior partners, managing partner. And so, do you just bust into the managing partner's office and start asking questions? There's kind of time and place. People working in the office kind of know who to ask and when to ask and what not to do. And that's important to be in there and learn that stuff, and there's no way to teach it other than to do it. And so I don't have a problem with people coming in with, hey, if they're going to come in with the flip flops, we'll tell them. And then if they change, great. If they don't, then, well, hey, it's not going to work out. But I've also seen it in the other direction where somebody's too scared.
Okay.
And so they just go and they sit in the office and they're not going to ask any questions, and they don't want to, make a fuss. And I get that, and I respect that, but then also they're not learning, they're not getting anything. So there's a balance there of you don't want to be too precocious, but you have to assert yourself and say, hey, this is a learning opportunity, because when we bring in an intern, we're not really expecting much productivity. We're not
Right.
we're not saying like, oh, we're going to pay, and these are all paid, and we're not saying like, oh wow, we're going to pay this person to come in and they're going to do some work for us. It's like, this is an opportunity to build a relationship with that person, for them to learn, and then if it works out when they graduate, we may have a great employee. But that's our bargain. We're not expecting great work.
Okay, great. And how much do lawyers really make?
Well, that ranges obviously in what area. There's big differences even in California, which I was surprised about. But if you're talking about Los Angeles, and I would say coming out the gate, that's going to depend on where you work. If you're working for government, might be 60, $80,000 to begin with. A private law firm, a tiny law firm might be 75,000 to start with. Kind of mid-sized firm might be 100, and then the big law firms are 180, $200,000, and then from there, I would say mid career lawyers are going to be making a few $100,000, 200, 300,000, maybe get up to $500,000, and then super successful lawyers can make over $1 million, several $1 million a year, perhaps. And the thing like, well, why would these be these big variations? Why would somebody make 75,000 versus $500,000? And it really comes down to a couple factors, and obviously experience. But beyond that, it's, well, how many hours are you putting in? And there's really no part-time lawyer job. That doesn't exist. And so these jobs require a lot of hours. And then, okay, great. So hey, if you're willing to put in all these hours, and why then again, is somebody making 3, 4, 5 times as much as somebody else? Well, really it comes down to two things. One is a very specific skill set that you've honed, and so one area of law as best as anyone does, and or you can go to court and make the best arguments and get great results where you're going to make more money. And then it's the origination of business that really is going to set people apart. And so if you're good with people, you know how to talk, you know how to listen, and eventually you start bringing in work to the firm, and that the rainmaker concept is what's really going to set people apart in their compensation. And obviously that's going to come later, and that's everybody's goal. Not everybody gets there, but that's really the main driver as to why somebody might make 100,000 versus $500,000.
Yeah, it's it's helping the firm make money. It's Are you a revenue generator or an expense to a certain extent?
Yeah, we got to bring in the work. Not everyone's going to do that, and so we have a saying in law. There's minders, finders, and grinders. And so the grinder would be the new associate coming in, and here's an assignment, here's a deadline, write this brief, and they just what we call grind, and they're just churning out this work product and billing hours. And then the mid-level lawyers are the minders. Those are the ones that supervise the work. And then the finder is the one who originates the client. gives it to the minder, and the minder then supervises the grinder. And so everyone's trying to work up that food chain. And yeah.
That's pretty good description of it. Okay. Now I'm going to move away a little bit from the professional development and admissions focus that's typical of this podcast, since your area of expertise may be of value to our listeners in a slightly different area of their lives. Do you recommend a prenup, and why or why not?
Well, I recommend talking about one. It's not for everyone. It's very expensive, and because at least in California, both sides need a lawyer, and it's like the only contract that I know about that really mandates that both sides have legal representation. Really? And because they have been abused, and so the legislature has basically mandated counsel, and also there's certainly nothing romantic about bringing lawyers into a planned wedding. But the good thing about it, the healthy thing about it, is that it forces people to talk about their finances. And most people, when they're contemplating marriage, they're saying, well, do you want to have kids, or where do you want to live? But they're not talking about, well, gee, if we buy something during marriage, how's that going to be titled? And, who's going to pay the bills? And what if we break up? So these conversations around finances are usually never had before marriage, and then people find out during the marriage that one's a spender and one's a saver, and that creates huge problems. Or one was anticipating that they would share more of their maybe premarital wealth than is happening. And so having those conversations is very healthy, and the prenup forces people to do that. So that's the only thing I like about a prenup. And I do quite a few of them, but I really dislike them, honestly.
Because they break couples up?
Well, they can be healthy, but it many times it does allocate control to one party, and can set the marriage off on a bad foot. And sometimes they're necessary. And when there's children involved from a prior marriage, well, now you're getting remarried, and well, you have two obligations. You have an obligation to your new spouse, but you also have obligation to your kids. And those things could be in conflict. So to protect everyone, a prenup could be good. But this is the thing about family law. We're dealing with some very personal stuff. And so people
and
like
emotionally charged.
It is, and I think some people like that. Some people don't want to have anything to do with that. But I think most people who do well in this job, not just family law, but any law, is if you have to be service minded. If you hate people and you're antisocial and you don't like helping, this is not the right job for you. We're servants to wealthy people, but nevertheless servants, and people come to us with their problems, and they want our help with it. And if you have a helping hand, if that's your mindset, this is a great job, because you do get to make a difference in people's lives. There's boundaries that you have to keep, certainly. But I think that's one of the things that if you're questioning, do I want to be a lawyer? Should I go and apply? Thinking about, well, why do you want to do this? If it's just to make money, there's better ways to make money than this. But if you want to help people, you want to make a difference, and get paid really well, this is a great career.
Okay, great. What's the craziest prenup request you've ever gotten?
Well, there's some sick folks out there, and I think that these people that are marrying, and say there's some really big age differences. There's big differences in finances, and now they're getting married, and they don't really trust each other so much, so they're going to do this prenup. And mostly you would think it's over money, but there have been provisions in there about How many times are we going to have sex, or do you
Oh
have to have
gosh.
sex during this relationship? What can about weight gain, drug usage, cheating, and so when I see stuff like that, I don't want to be involved in it, because they're not marrying for the right reasons, and this is just a way of controlling somebody else. And it's not, at least in California, and probably most places, none of those provisions are valid. And so I just won't write an agreement with an invalid provision in there. And luckily, where I'm at in my career, I don't help people I don't like. And
Okay.
so, and you should be doing that, honestly, even at the beginning of your career too. If you don't like them, you don't want to help them, don't help them, because
Just
it's
turn down the
just going
work.
to go bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think there are many service fields where that's true. I'm not sure that in all, I'm thinking like healthcare field, I'm not sure that healthcare workers can say, I don't like this person.
Yeah.
I'm not going to work with them, but it is certainly true in a lot of places. Now, what's something different about working with celebrities in family law than working with non celebrities, other than the potential for publicity and that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, what I've learned, and had some great fortune working with folks that have been, idols and heroes of mine, and I just like, wow, I can't believe, like, I'm meeting this person and helping them, and they're asking me for advice, and but when it comes down to it, we're all the same, and we're all people with all the same type of problems, and maybe a celebrity has more zeros attached to their problems. But it really doesn't matter if somebody's fighting over their kids or going through a divorce, and there's some bitter allegations being made. It doesn't matter who they are and where they
Yeah.
came from. It hurts just the same. And so that's one thing that I've learned. And the other thing is that these celebrities, the persona that someone has oftentimes doesn't match who they really are. And we're seeing people under some significant stress. And I've been surprised at the immaturity of some of these folks, and lack of growth in their personal life. And maybe it's because they were never challenged in this way, and never held accountable for anything, and have a lot of people surrounding them who agree with them. And then now their personal lives are exposed. They're under pressure. They have to make decisions, and this is all super negative, and then the kind of bad side comes out. So I almost take pity on some of these folks, and it's weird, because you would think, wow, this person has everything, they're rich and they're famous, but then when you look at some of them, they're wow, they're broken, and I wouldn't trade places.
Great. Great perspective. Thank you. Let's just, before we wrap up the interview, I just want to ask if you have any last words of advice for pre-law students or law students who want to pursue a career in the law.
My advice is, ask for help. It sounds so simple, but people aren't doing that. And I wish I would have done that. I mean, I was lucky to have my dad, but ask for help, and it's amazing. You'll get it. People will respond. And so I wouldn't be shy about that. You're not wasting anybody's time. The people who are engaged in this profession, who love it, they want it to grow. They want people to come in. They want you to be interested in this. And it's like, if we love our job, we want to share this with you, and we want to make sure it's the right choice for you. So don't be shy. Don't hesitate. Reach out, ask for help. You will get help. You're going to make a connection. And that may lead to a first job. That may lead to a totally different area of law that you never anticipated before. So it's kind of ask and ye shall receive concept. But I see a lot of people thinking, well, I don't want to be a bother, and I'm going to go through law school and then I'll start meeting lawyers. No, you should be meeting lawyers before you think about applying.
I agree. I agree. And I certainly do ask for help. I think that the help that Chris is talking about, that you're talking about, Chris, is more to make sure that it's the right decision for you by doing your homework before you apply. But in terms of actually helping you apply and make sure you're applying to the best programs for you, we'd be happy to help you with that. So, Christopher, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Where can listeners and potential applicants learn more about your work?
So if you could Google me, Christopher Melcher, Melcher. You will see lots of stuff come up. And you can also, what I encourage you to do is get on LinkedIn and connect up with me. And if you haven't used that before, it's a great way. So you can test it out with me. I'll be your first connection. And so get on LinkedIn, just search my name, Christopher Melcher, family lawyer in Los Angeles. You will see me there. And, send me a message and connection requests, and I will respond. Tell me that you heard me on the show, and I would be really happy to be your first connection on LinkedIn.
Okay. Well, we're going to include links in the show notes at exhibit.com/401 to Chris's law firm and also to his LinkedIn profile so that you really can connect with him very easily. A quick reminder, grab your free copy of the Law School Admissions Guide, 8 Tips for Success, Acceptance Informative Free Guide for Law School Applicants at exhibit.com/401 download. That's where you can get it, exhibit.com/401 download. Listeners, thank you too for joining Chris Melcher and me for our 401st episode. If you found this show helpful, I have a favor to ask. Please share your thoughts. Just go to lovethepodcast.com/AST and you'll be able to rate and review on iTunes and other top podcast sites. Doing so helps potential listeners find us and is much appreciated. Thanks again for coming. This is Admission Straight Talk produced by Accepted, and I'm your host, Linda Abraham. I'll talk to you again next week.